Welcome to the Center for Leadership and Involvement's overview of the Blueprint Finance module. Student organizations at the University of Chicago are able to view information about their financial account, request payments for their organization, and submit some student government funding requests, all through the Blueprint system. There are two sets of financial records that will be essential for your treasurer to review in order to understand the state of your account. This is because the Blueprint Finance module is separate from the university's financial accounting system. The two systems run in parallel, so there is a potential for records within the two systems to diverge. We ask that you review these records regularly, and if you note any differences, that you bring those to our financial operations office so that we can make the appropriate adjustments. The first of these financial records is the hard copy monthly statement of your account called your transaction report. You can collect these reports from the Financial Operations Office, and they will provide a list of all of your organization's income and expenses for the current academic year, as well as your balance on account as of the end of the previous month. This is the university's official report of your account, and these reports are cumulative. Each new report replaces the previous report until the end of the academic year. The Blueprint Finance module is your second access to your account information. This offers a much more accessible and regularly updated statement of your finances. This system should help you to more easily manage all of your transactions on a day-to-day basis. Access to the Finance module is governed based on your Blueprint roster. By default, your president, treasurer, and primary contact will have access to all of the finance features on your Blueprint page. You can further delegate finances to additional officers by creating or adjusting the positions they hold within Manage Positions in your roster menu. This Manage Positions menu allows you to create and edit any positions, and for each positions there is a menu defining access. Here you can set all access to your page, no access, or limited access, and give officers access to certain features of your Blueprint page, such as events, documents, or, in this case, finance. When giving a member access, you can give them view access. In the case of finance, that would mean they would be able to see your list of transactions and your balance, but not be able to submit financial requests. If you choose to give full access, they will be able to submit financial transactions and funding requests on behalf of your organization. Once you're logged into Blueprint, you have the appropriate finance access, you'll be able to review your account. So here in Blueprint, I'm going to use the My Shortcuts menu to jump to my organization, the Center for Leadership and Involvement. And once I'm on my organization page, you can see I have the Finance tab available. Here in the Finance module, I'll be able to review my balance and submit all of my requests. Here on the main page, I have a list of purchase requests. These are requests for payments that I've submitted along with their statuses. You can see that most of these are denied or canceled because they are test entries. We also have a funding request tab where you can see your SGFC or CSF requests, but we're going to start with the Accounts tab. Now I need to select my account, and here I have a great snapshot of my financial account. There are three important fields here. The first field, the balance, is the amount that Blueprint records that I have on account. This is a great figure to check against your transaction report, and if they start to diverge greatly, you'll want to check with the finance office. The encumbered funds field records the funds that I've submitted recent requests for payments through the finance module, but payments that have not yet been transacted. This helps keep track of the commitments that are currently in progress. The final field here is the available funds field, and this is a synthesis of the previous two fields. It provides a good working number for how much money is truly available, your balance less your recently encumbered funds. Below these fields, I can see a list of purchase requests that have been made by my organization. If I'm to click on the name of a request, it will open the request, and I'll be able to see all the details that were submitted, as well as the attached receipts or invoices associated with that. The second tab is called Transactions. This tab shows all the activity affecting my balance in Blueprint. This does include the transactions based on the purchase requests that I've submitted, but it also includes various imported transactions, as you can see noted here. These are items that are not submitted through the system, like copy charges, transfers received from other departments, deposits of funds, and other allocations. Because those items aren't initiated by you in Blueprint, we upload them on a weekly basis so that you can have an accurate balance in Blueprint. You can also open each of these transactions to get some additional details. For example, I can open here, and we can see this transaction was for copy charges in the month of September. So that helps me keep track of what's happening on my account. So now that you know how to review the funds available and the current activity on your account, let's look at how to put in a request for funding. So when preparing to request a transaction to come out of your account, whether for reimbursement or payment, there are a few steps that you'll want to make sure to take to ensure a successful transaction. First, you'll want to review your account balance in Blueprint to know what you have available, as well as your specific event budget so that you know how much money you have earmarked for each expense in your program. Once you're familiar with your budget and how much money you have for each component of your budget, you'll also want to use our website, the resource guide, your advisor, or our financial operations office to become familiar with the policies and requirements for the type of transaction you're going to request. This helps you understand what kind of documents you'll need to supply, what vendors you can use, and what types of expense must be processed as direct university payments rather than reimbursements. Please remember that not all transactions can be reimbursed. So it's important to check our website or check with your advisor. Once you're familiar with the budget and the requirements and documentation requirements for the specific transaction you're looking to make, you can go ahead and assign a member to make the purchase. In many cases, this may be yourself, and you can go ahead and make a purchase. But if you're working with an event chair or general member who's going to be making a purchase, it's important for you to make sure that they have all this information about your budget, about the transaction types that are available, about the documentation requirements, so that they can successfully complete the transaction. Remember, only members with assigned full access to finance can create purchase requests. If you've assigned other members to make purchases, you may need to collect the information from them and submit the request on their behalf if they are not set up with full access. Our recommendation is that you limit the number of positions that are able to submit your purchase requests so that you don't end up with a situation where multiple people are making requests against the same funds at the same time. So once you have all the documents you need and the information about the payee, you're ready to submit your purchase request. There's a form to complete that we'll look at in just a moment that you'll need to complete and then upload some documents to. Following the submission, you'll also need to submit paper copies of most types of documentation to the Financial Operations Office. So, returning to my Blueprint page, again, I'm going to return to the Center for Leadership and Involvement, open the Finance module, and on this first page, above the account information we were looking at previously, you'll see I have two buttons. One, to create a funding request. This is where you can submit a request for SGFC, or the Community Service Fund. And one, create a purchase request, which is what we'll take a look at about how to request money to come out of your RSO account. So this is just a web form that you'll need to complete and attach information to, but I want to walk you through some of the important fields. The first field is the subject. We strongly recommend that you use the format event or program name followed by the expense. You'll want to make sure that you're consistent with your subjects so that you can review the request history on that first page easily and understand what each entry is without having to open them and look at the details. If you're not consistent, you'll find that you have to go hunting around to try to figure out what each transaction is. The requested amount field needs to be precise. I should note that you'll be unable to resubmit requests that have already been submitted, so it's important to be accurate and descriptive from the outset. For example, if the requested amount provided here doesn't match the receipt amounts that you've attached, unless you've stated that you're requesting a partial reimbursement, your request would be denied. And that means you can't go back and edit it and resubmit it. You'd have to start all over with a new request. So it's important to be precise up front. The description field is also very important. It's what lets our office know what the purchase was for. You should craft descriptions that allow someone who's unfamiliar with your program or event to understand what the purchase was. Typically, a sentence or two will suffice, but you should include enough detail so that it's clear what you were purchasing and what it was for. Vague descriptions may lead to denied requests, just like inaccurate request amounts. Next, you'll need to select your account. This is quite easy. Most organizations will have a single account to choose from, followed by a selection for the category of your request. So this is where you let us know whether you're asking to reimburse a member of your group, make a payment to a company, issue a purchase order to a company, etc. There are many types of transactions in here that actually won't be used by you. They're used for our upload. So if you have any questions about the types of transactions, don't hesitate to reach out to our financial officer, your advisor. The next is the payee information. You should always enter the full legal name of the person being paid or reimbursed. You should not use nicknames or Americanized names. These should match what the university has on file. If you're paying a company, again, you could just use the first name field. You don't have to worry about the last name field in the case of issuing a payment to a corporation. Make sure to always include the street address as well. Even if you're requesting to pick up a check in our office, you must supply a full address for your request to be processed. So if you leave the street, city, state, zip empty, it's going to be rejected unless you're making a transfer within the university to another department. But anytime you're requesting a check of any sort, you do need to provide the full street information. Next, in the additional information section, here's where we get into some of the details of your payment. The date of the event and activity is always required, so be sure to put in the date of the program or when you incurred the expense. We also ask that you then categorize your event or activity. You can select one of the general types here, or you can always select other and provide additional information below. As you're selecting these, we've got some information bubbles that help provide some key information. For example, under food, it reminds you that the number of people field here must include more than 11 people for food. Otherwise, you need to supply the full name. So if you've got a food expense, you list 5 people and the number of people for whom, you must include their first and last names in the additional section below. Additionally, information about the types of tax forms and links to our website for documentation information for these different account payable types are available here. For the number of people section, I should note that this is the number of people attending your event or program. If this is an expense for food, it needs to be the number of people who are eating the food. So if you had a meal for your volunteers at an event, for example, you'd want to include the number of volunteers who ate the food, not the number of people at the larger event in that case. Payee affiliation is pretty straightforward. Student, staff, faculty, non-affiliated, company, another RSO, just to identify who we're paying. And then payee email, phone number, and fax is contact information for the person you're paying. Check needed by date. This is only if there's a specific due date on an invoice, or if you need to have the check in hand on a certain date to give to a vendor at an event. Otherwise, you can leave this blank. All checks come ASAP otherwise. Check distribution is where you can indicate whether you'd like to have the check mailed out directly to the payee or whether you'd like to pick it up in the financial office. The mail option is preferred, and it is faster, but if you prefer to pick the check up on campus, we'll be able to email you as soon as it's ready, and you'll be able to pick it up in the Reynolds Club. Next is the receipts. We've got a document upload feature that you can use to upload electronic copies of your required documents or receipts. That could also be invoices, contracts, or tax forms. The purpose of this upload is for our office to be able to review your documentation in advance of asking you to come out to the Reynolds Club. This gives us the opportunity to note any problems with documentation or any additional documentation requirements that we can reach out to you about without having you walk all the way to campus first. For most documents, including all cash register receipts, you will need to bring those original copies to the finance office later when prompted by the system, as I'll show you. So make sure not to discard any information once you've uploaded it. There are 3 upload fields here, so you can upload up to 3 files. If you have more than 3 files, you can condense those into a single document and utilize just one of the upload fields. So once you've thoroughly completed the form and been very descriptive, uploaded all of your documentation, added any additional information, whether that's the names of people for food, a description of an activity type that's not one of the defaults, you can click to submit your request. So I'm going to cancel. So your submitted request, your new one, will show up at the top of your list here. You'll have a status and a stage that you can use to tell exactly what's happening with a given request at any time. So let's talk about the statuses and stages. So your purchase request comes in online. Every request starts off in review by our office, where we check the documentation to note whether we can approve it, deny it if it's missing information. Next is a stage where you wait to get, our office waits for you to bring in the original receipts if they are required. We'll talk more about that later. Next, the payment is processed, and then a check is dispersed. The whole process happens within Blueprint, save for a visit to the financial office to drop off your receipts once everything's been approved. So there are two indicators to look at for any purchase request to figure out what's happening with it. The first is status. Every request starts in an unapproved status. This means it's in the queue waiting to be reviewed, or it's with your advisor for their review in some cases. The next status is approved. This means it's been accepted by the Financial Operations Office, that your descriptions were sufficient, and that there are no policy or documentation problems with your request. Completed means that any required documents have been submitted to the Finance Office and that your request has now been processed. You're now in the state of waiting for a check to be issued. There are finally two statuses here in the red column that are problematic. They're denied and canceled. These will be virtually equivalent for your purposes. They occur when insufficient information was provided, or a policy prohibits the type of payment that you're requesting, that you don't have sufficient funds, or you're missing some documentation. For any of these reasons, your request will be denied, and you'll need to look at the comments and resubmit a request to request a new payment. Anytime your status changes, you'll receive a notification in your Blueprint inbox. Here you should be able to get any pertinent information about whether you need to submit receipts, what any problems with your documentation were. You can also find your history of statuses at the bottom section of each purchase request that you open. The next indicator is the stage. While the status tells you whether or not your report has been accepted or processed, the stage tells you whose action is required next in the workflow. This will help you understand where to follow up with any request. So submission review is the initial stage for all submitted requests. All new requests have a submission review stage along with their unapproved status. There's also a potential stage called advisor review. Most expenses will not go through your advisor's hands. It will proceed straight through for processing if everything is okay. But for items where you don't have enough funds on account to cover the expense, items when there is alcohol or other risk that needs to be addressed, when there are any contracts or payments for student travel, or when it's just not clear how an expense is related to your program or your event, your advisor will be engaged in an advisor review stage. If your expense goes into advisor review, your advisor should reach out to you to have any necessary conversations related to the expense in question, and then they'll be able to approve or deny based on those conversations. If you notice you have a purchase request that's sitting in the advisor review stage, you can always reach out to your advisor directly to address that. The next stage for requests is the receipt document submission stage. This means that the next action for your request to proceed is waiting for you to bring your receipts or documents to the Reynolds Club Financial Operations Office. As I mentioned, for most document types, you will need to submit hard copies after your purchase request has been reviewed. And you'll be prompted to do so with your status change notification that you receive. So once your request is approved and moved into receipt documentation submission, you'll have a message in your Blueprint inbox that lets you know that it's time to submit receipts for that request. Finally, once your receipts have all been submitted to the office, or if none of the documentation that you submitted required receipts, the Finance Office review stage means that your request is in queue for processing by the Financial Operations Office. Finally, the closed stage means that the progress of your request has ended. So if you have a completed status and a stage of close, that means that everything's finished. You're either just waiting for the check or you should already have a check in hand. Now, if you see the stage closed but your status is canceled or denied, this means that you'll need to resubmit your expense because this request is finished due to whatever problems were noted in the comments. So as you can see, I have several requests here in the system. As I mentioned before, most are denied or canceled because they were testing submissions. But here is where you can see your status and stage settings. So I have a receipt here, request here at the top listed as BP Finance training costs for $150. I can see that it was approved on September 29th, so it's approved, and the stage is receipt document submission. This means that for processing to continue, I need to bring in the original receipts for the request. Now, there are two places where I can get more information about the receipts that I need to submit. So I can see here, this will prompt me to bring in receipts, but I also have in my Blueprint message box a notification here that I got that shows the status change, that it's been approved, and I can click here to jump right to the request. But I also have the comment, please bring all receipts to the financial office. This is an additional prompt to me that those receipts need to be submitted. So you'll get all of those prompts here in your Blueprint message box, and depending on how you have your notifications set, you may also receive those in your UChicago email. So to return to my finance module. Additionally, if I sort by date approved, I can also see on the request itself, for any previous request, I can see the history here, what was approved and when, all of the information that I submitted. I would also be able to click to review any of the documents that were submitted. And then here at the bottom in the stage history, I have a list of all the dates of act, so what changed and when. So I can see that I submitted it for submission review on 9/29. I can also see that it was approved and moved to receipt document submission. Again, here's that comment about bringing receipts. In this case, I changed my own stage, which is not something you will do, so you'll also be able to see who's modifying and moving your requests through the system. So these reports, these copies, are tremendously helpful in going back and reviewing the history of what happened, what you've submitted, seeing copies of old invoices. So as time moves forward, you'll be able to go back to last year and see the invoice they submitted for an event. If you're looking to have that particular expense again, you can see what company was used, how much they ordered, etc. So we've talked quite a bit about submitting the original receipts. I want to take a few minutes to talk about how that works. So you will need to upload digital copies of all of your documentation at the time you submit your request. We use these documents to assess your request and decide whether it can be approved or denied, whether you need more information or there's a policy problem. Clear scans or very clear photos of documents can be accepted at this point. We do not need to see, we do rather need to see the full document, nothing cut off in the images, minimal distortion for it to be usable. And as I've mentioned, in most cases you will need to also submit these documents, the original hard copies, during the receipt documentation stage. But there are a few instances where digital copies are sufficient for processing, and you may not have to come to the Reynolds Club at all. The distinction for what can be accepted digitally and what requires physical documents is based on whether or not there is a unique original document. The IRS requires that the university retain all of those unique original documents, so it's really important to make sure that you don't discard any receipts, even if you think that the digital documents are supposed to be sufficient. You should always retain those in case they're asked for. So, digital documents are sufficient when there isn't a unique hard copy original. So this includes any emailed invoices from companies for orders that you've made, online purchases where the email receipt is the only receipt that exists, any credit card statements you might need to submit to substantiate payment for a reimbursement, and then any tax forms and contracts that you might submit. These would have to be pre-signed by your advisor and the third party to be accepted, but we won't require you to bring in the hard copies of tax forms and contracts because we've previously accepted those via fax, for example. Additionally, the backup documentation form that you may use if you've lost a receipt and need approval from your advisor to get a reimbursement, or if you paid for cash on a handwritten receipt, for example, and you need to provide this form to substantiate your payment. Again, those backup documentation forms all need to be pre-signed by the individual getting reimbursed and your advisor before you upload those. Now, there are the cases where an original, unique physical document exists and you will have to submit it. This includes any cash register receipts from a purchase at a store, most restaurant receipts that you get, the guest check receipts. Anything where a receipt is handwritten, you'll need to submit the original copies. And then if you have any airline passenger receipts, for example, the non-emailed, the kind that you pick up at the counter, things like that where there's an original physical document you would have to submit. So we've been very pleased to offer this online process for RSO Finances, and we've seen great success with student group usage. If you have any questions about how to access the finance module or how to utilize it successfully, please don't hesitate to reach out to your organization's advisor or stop by our financial operations office. We are always happy to provide additional information and answer any questions you may have.